Meeple Nation, episode 342, The Grid. 4 games that use grid movement.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. If you want to enhance your game night, we recommend to jump onto GameToppersLLC.com and check out what they have. Nathan and Logan were finally able to go play on the Minecraft,
which was amazing.
The size is impressive. Enhance your game night. Check it out. See what they've got. See what will fit in your game room, and we recommend it. It's been awesome for all of us.
Highly enjoy the game, Toppers. We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
And I am Andy Holliday.
I love that pause.
Some emphasis on that one.
He is.
That was the Logan.
Andrew.
So this week, we are discussing the 4 grid movement games that we chose. Each of us has chosen one game to talk about, and we're going to get into it. There's some good stuff here. I'll go ahead and kick us off by talking about Robo Rally.
So we've talked about Robo Rally several times, but Robo Rally is a great game.
A great grid movement game.
A great grid movement game.
Say that 12 times fast.
No. But anyways, carry on.
This has long been one of my favorites. It's an old game. I don't even know when it first came out. Several years ago, they actually put out a new version, a new edition, or whatever you want to call it. It's just a great game. In this game...
Before you go too far, the original one came out in 1994.
1994.
Re-released edition was 2016.
Yeah, just a few years ago. I think they were wise to re-release it. The robots of the Robo Rally Automobile Factory spend their weekdays toiling at the assembly line. They put in hard hours building high-speed supercars that they never get to see in action. But on Saturday nights, the factory becomes a world of mad machines and dangerous schemes as these robots engage in their own epic race. It takes speed, wits, and dirty tricks to become a racing legend. Each player chooses a robot and directs its moves by playing cards. And we'll get into that a little bit in just a minute. Some cool robots, some fun ones. They have, at least the versions that I've played, they're either a little cardboard cutout. Well, I guess there's 2 of them because you have a little cardboard cutout because you all start out as virtual robots because you start on the same space. And then they have cool little miniatures. Miniature meeples. Robot meeples. Robeeples? Anyhow, as play goes on, chaos ensues as all players reveal the cards they've chosen. Players face obstacles like industrial lasers, gaping pits, and moving conveyor belts. Those can also be used to their advantage. Each player aims to make it to each of the checkpoints in numerical order, and the first player to reach all of the checkpoints wins. Setting up this game, you reach into the box, you've got several boards, and the boards have a grid on them. Talking about grid movement, it's a good thing. I think it's a 12 by 12 square grid on each board. You decide as you're setting up the game how many boards you want to play with and how many flags or checkpoints you want to include as well. You just set those up in different places on the boards. And on these grids, you have different things, conveyor belts. You have walls that you just program your robot to go around those. But you set up the whole board. You all start on one spot. You're each dealt 9 cards. Those cards are how you program your robot. Each player will take those 9 cards and secretly place 5 of them face down in order that they want them to happen. And these cards are directional cards. Some of them are move forward 1, 2, or 3 spaces. Sorry, there aren't any that include more than one choice, right? It's either a move 1, move 2, or move 3. There's a back up 1 space. There's U-turn. There's turn left, turn right. There's all these different cards that you place in order that you want them to happen. And then you all reveal each register or each card in order. So you all reveal your first register. Whatever happens with your robot can totally affect what happens with somebody else's robot. For example, if you have 2 robots that collide, whoever has the highest number on their card will happen first.
It's a simultaneous reveal?
You simultaneously reveal and everything moves happen at the same time. So if I turn left and Andy Poops is right next to me and he goes forward straight into me, he's going to go forward and push me 1 space or 2 if he played a 2 or 3. And he could push me into a pit. He could push me off the edge of the board. He could push me underneath. There's smashers, push me into the line of a laser fire. There's all sorts of different things that could happen. At the end, after all of the board elements take place, Each robot has a laser in the front. Each robot fires a laser, and so it...
So is that laser fire optional?
Nope, happens.
It happens?
Every time.
And it only faces forward. So whatever the forward-facing...
5 registers, wherever you are facing forward, you shoot a laser in that direction.
Okay, so it doesn't happen after each register. It only happens after the 5th register.
Correct.
Barriers, the walls, all that stuff. Is that set in stone, or is there ways to move that stuff around?
No, that stuff's all...
That's
On
just
that
the player board.
Yeah, and then everything happens in a specific order. Blue conveyor belts that move you 2 spaces. Red conveyor belts that move 1. Pushers that will push you. There's smashers. There's...
Spiked walls.
So what happens
all
if
sorts
you
of
get
stuff.
smashed? Do you just start back from the beginning, or are you
So-
out of the game?
When you get smashed, each robot has 3 lives, I believe. Although I think that's an optional increase it or reduce it depending on the length of the game you want. But yeah, you go back to the last checkpoint that you touched. So there's the checkpoint that you start on. Each flag has a little wrench. Each checkpoint has a wrench. You can go there and heal wounds. And every time you touch a new checkpoint, that's where your new start place is if you happen to die. You can take, I believe, 9 wounds before you die. Maybe. I don't remember. You can take a bunch. But what happens is if you take too many, once you take 4, your 5th one goes on your 5th register and it locks whatever you played there. If you take 3 additional at that point, well, you'd have 3 registers locked. So if you had 3 cards that just move you forward, it can get pretty dangerous. You could be headed straight for a cliff or whatever else.
So this represents your robot having a malfunction, right? And so it's
Uh-huh.
stuck. Manipulate what it does on the first 2 registers, but if you have that damage on those last 3 registers,
right.
that's going to happen regardless of what dangers lie ahead, and there's
Yep.
nothing you as a player can do about it.
Absolutely. Well, there's one thing you can do is you can choose to shut down at the end of a phase, basically. End of a round. Get out your cards and you say, you know what, I'm shutting down. I'm not playing any cards. That's dangerous as well, though, because all the board elements still take place. So if you're on a conveyor belt, you're moving and you don't know where you're going to end up. But what that means is you're not going to do any of those cards that round because your robot's shut down and heal, basically, when you do that. Spots on the board that are double wrenches, those also count as checkpoints. This is one of my favorite things about the game. It provides more options and variability and just some fun stuff. Whenever you end your 5th register on one of those, you get dealt a card, and I don't remember exactly what they're called. It's like it's upgrades for your robot. Sometimes it's a more powerful laser, or it could be a laser that also pushes somebody, or it can be a tractor beam and it can pull somebody. There's a bunch of different cards that just give you awesome little abilities that you can use.
So there's no asymmetry as far as the robots themselves until you get upgrades.
Right. Though Zoombot is just cool because he's my robot. So
Is that the name of the robot?
So
or
yeah,
is-
there's different robots that have different names. Zoombot, I think there's Smashbot, Trundle, several different ones. One of them looks just like Johnny Five.
Okay, for those of us who didn't grow up in the 80s, have no idea who Johnny Five is.
Hey, I
Wait.
grew up in the 90s, and I know who Johnny Five is.
And
All right, so that will
if my wife's
bridge 2
listening,
gaps.
she'll disagree with you as well because she'll tell you that I haven't ever grown up.
Okay, anybody who was raised in the 80s, and apparently the 90s, will know who Johnny Five is. The rest of the world
Should
May
look it
not.
up and enjoy life when they find it.
I can't even remember the name
Short
of the movie.
Circuit.
Short Circuit.
It's an old movie that I wouldn't watch today because it was made too long ago.
Oh, Last Action Hero. I used to have both those movies on the same VHS. It was the best thing ever.
Yeah, but Johnny Five is a robot in a movie called Short Circuit.
Yeah, he's alive.
Johnny Five is alive. Number 5 is alive. Anyway, Robo Rally really does get chaotic at times and gets fun, and you end up laughing. Although other people I've seen people get pretty upset too with this game. It's a good time. I've always loved it. When I first started coming around game night in the early years, it was played, loved it immediately. So I was really excited to see when they remade it. So that is Robo Rally.
I have fond memories of Robo Rally. I was one of those people that probably got more aggressively beat up because I wasn't very good at programming my moves. So there was lots of times I was being bashed into walls or shot or pushed into the pits. I found myself getting very frustrated with that game.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it. The simpler version, Tiny Epic Mechs, which we still need to get to the table. Both Andy and I own that. And
Well, it's just we have so many legacy games on our...
we do have a lot of
docket.
legacy games on our docket for sure. And somebody's 10 for 10 that lacking. And we're here in October now.
And we have to
And-
play City of Kings like 12 more times?
9 more times. Gloomhaven 7 more times.
We better get going.
We need to tell our wives that we're going on vacation.
Yeah.
And then you can become divorced like me. My game, talked about it a little bit before, it's Betrayal Legacy. Because it was my first time playing a Betrayal game, so we talked about in our news episode games we actually got to the table that we haven't played before. Betrayal Legacy is a game that plays 3 to 5 and actually plays best with 5. Plays 45 minutes to 90 minutes, which we have challenged both of those numbers before. And it's about a medium weight game. I actually think it's fairly simple for what it is.
I agree. I mean, once you get the basics down, once you understand it, it is really easy to play.
I think the hardest thing for me to do when we were learning the game the first time, it just didn't track in my head, thematic-wise, how it all clicked together. Avoiding spoiler alerts, Betrayal Legacy is Betrayal at House on the Hill, but Legacy version. So you start, the 1600s is the prologue. Every 10 years, every 50 years, it's something like that. You play different members of your family going through this haunted house on the hill, going through these different adventures and these haunts that happen. There's different. During the prologue, there's just confusing about how simple it was. The person was upset that you're at your house. Now they're perfectly cool with you tearing through their house looking for cool artifacts. It was super disconnected for me. That I had a hard time getting past. Once you get past that, it's a fun game. I super enjoy it so far. I really want to be the traitor. Curbed all stereotypes, and I've gone 5 times thus far without being the traitor.
It's overrated being the traitor.
I don't know. I love
especially
being the
that
traitor.
game. Huh?
That game was terrible.
Before we get into that, Betrayal Legacy, their little synopsis in the game. Why would people keep exploring a haunted mansion for decade after decade, especially when horrible things happen there every time? Curiosity. I suppose that perhaps an ignorant boldness that comes from the belief that we know better than those who have come before. Look at what we've learned, marvel at the tools we have at hand. Surely we'll all exit safely this time. I've heard for a long time that Betrayal Legacy is one of the best legacies.
A lot of people have championed that this was their favorite Legacy game. I'm not one of those people so far.
I'm not either.
I find it super disconnected from game to game. Doesn't feel like it's very legacy oriented from choices I've made before that are impacting me now. I know we've kind of fallen off of our pandemic kick that we were doing, but I thought pandemic, my choices, the consequences, if we won, we lost, tied so much to the next game where, okay, were you the one that helped secure victory? Okay, your name goes here. Which it could change later on. We don't know.
We've played 5 games into the
13 chapters.
5 out of the 13 chapters. And so there is still tons of game to explore there. But yeah, I fully agree with you. The feel of the involvement with the pandemic from game to game is far more fluid. And I'm not saying I don't enjoy Betrayal Legacy because I'm having a ton of fun with it. That whole fluid feel of going from one game to the next wasn't really quite there. I mean, even games like Seafall, those experiences in the game prior flowed over better than they did in Betrayal.
I would have to double check the years that they came out, but just from what people have told me, it went like Risk Legacy, Betrayal Legacy, then some of these other games.
You know, I believe Betrayal is fairly recent. Risk Legacy was the first one, yes. Then I believe Pandemic Legacy Season 1 was the second one. Seafall comes in there, and there's a couple others that...
then I'm a little bit more disappointed because then they had the opportunity to look at...
Don't get me wrong, the game is still really good. I really enjoy the variety, the openness of when the traitor triggers, how the traitor triggers, the how and the when that haunt triggers affects the game. And it affects the game differently for each group that's playing, right?
And it's what haunts too, because it depends on where you triggered the haunt.
Exactly.
When you do. So our friend Trent Howell made the comment on our Facebook post about Halloween games, and he says how he's played Betrayal Legacy many, many times. And I think that's the reason why it's not like each chapter guaranteed going to play this haunt or this situation. He's able to go through and play the game multiple times. Maybe he does repeat a few haunts here and there, but they hit different times, different ways. People have different legacy objects. One of my characters in the first game was able to claim these eyeglasses. They became my family's legacy, so when generations come after me and find my family's eyeglasses, they get special bonuses that nobody else get when they use that. There's so many different variations that if you play the game again, the legacy version, items shift hands, experiences are different haunts come at different times, so it could be a completely different experience.
Yeah, this is one of those legacy games that exactly that, right? I mean, you can go through it and you can play it, and then you can go through it and play it again and have a completely different experience. I like that.
As I've played, I'm kind of with Nathan, I enjoyed Pandemic Legacy a little bit more than Betrayal Legacy, and I look at it this way. So I just barely played this week. I played Pandemic with my daughter, and I would rather play Pandemic Legacy instead of Pandemic any day of the week. Pandemic Legacy is so much more fun.
It's so interesting.
It is. And then I play Betrayal Legacy versus Betrayal at House on the Hill, and I honestly would rather play Betrayal at House on the Hill than Betrayal Legacy.
Oh, really?
There's some aspects of Betrayal Legacy that aren't in Betrayal at House on the Hill that I like, but I like the character development that you get in a little bit longer game in Betrayal at House on the Hill. Whereas the haunt just, all of a sudden, we had that one game where the haunt started on the... We didn't go around the table one time around the table before the haunt started.
So hopefully that's what it's becoming, because that's the draw between Betrayal Legacy is once you finish the game, once you unlock all the tiles, once you unlock all the cards, it's your own custom version of the game. And so then you would avoid stuff like that, Andy, because you would have way more cards to go through before the haunt starts.
Yeah, I think ultimately, just as we go and as we develop it more, it's going to have more of that feel.
I think so too.
To your point, though, I can totally see that, because you're like, oh, this is more enjoyable to play the regular thing.
And something to keep an eye out for when you play it too. It's kind of like Imperial Assault in my mind. Some scenarios are weighted one direction or the other. So it's either weighted very heavily towards a traitor, weighted very heavily towards, I don't want to call them heroes, they're more like looters, whatever. The non-evil people, I guess. Less evil. Whatever. You have to pay attention to the strategy of your game too, because you get this little booklet that if you're the traitor, you go to another room to read your victory conditions. You have to remember the board, because sometimes you can make a crucial mistake and it just ruins it. Your chances of winning are slim.
Andy's sitting right there.
Yeah, I am. I'm right here.
But I mean, that's happened to us before. Like, there was another game where Nathan was the traitor. We had this carefully laid out plan, and then bam, all got ruined because another card came out that just ruined our strategy. Stuff like that happens, and weighted one direction or the other. But it doesn't mean that it's not a fun game one direction or the other.
I think you're right. I think some scenarios are weighted because you're playing the traitor and the traitor's always losing. That becomes a lot less fun.
Yeah.
They're weighted, but I think also it depends on, like in the case when I was a traitor, if we would have been able to explore the house a little bit more, or certain tiles would have come out, it would have been a completely different game.
Right.
So it really kind of depends on what has been discovered, which I think is great. I like that aspect of it. It's going to make it different every time.
Brings in that variability of the game for sure.
Overall, I think Betrayal Legacy is a good game. I'm looking forward to how it pans out. Ultimately, it's a very simple game when you just get down to it. I like the different strategies that you go through each different game. I think the hard part that I have with the game is just the theme not really tying to the gameplay super well. I think that's like what really connects me to games like Eldritch Horror. The theme and the gameplay connect really well. Same thing with like Pandemic Legacy. I feel that panic because the pandemic's exploding around the world. Where Betrayal Legacy, it just didn't really connect with me. I'm hoping it changes as we go through, because literally we're playing with half the explore tiles still in the box.
More than half, yeah. There's a good number, and I'm sure our opinion's going to change further as we have more experience with it, as we complete all 13 scenarios or chapters, whatever they call them. As we complete those, I'm sure our tales are going to be much different, and our appeal, and as we experience the complete game, is going to be much different. Something that I look forward to in a lot of these legacy games. So what makes this game a grid movement game?
It's grid movement because as you explore, different tiles that get flipped up that create a grid. So you explore outside, you explore in the basement, you explore the main floor or the upstairs of the house. Basically create this custom grid that you have to then explore or traverse, find the traitor, beat them up, have them beat you up.
Excellent. So my game that I'm going to talk about is actually very similar to Betrayal Legacy or Betrayal House on the Hill. Secret of the Lost Station. You're going to use that same kind of movement. You wake up, you're on this ship that rotates and shifts, is never the same. And the ship will adjust to situations that endanger the ship, and the ship will react. Campaign-driven game. It's not necessarily a legacy game, but it has a campaign that kind of gives it that legacy feel, meaning as you begin the campaign, you have less weapons, gear, tools that are available to you. And as you go through the scenario, earn respective equipment, depending on the hero that is involved in that. So 1 to 6 players, a cooperative game. They classify it as a sci-fi action adventure and exploration. It is highly detailed, unique sequel to Secrets of the Lost Tomb, which Secrets of the Lost Tomb is I've played. I don't know if any of you guys have played it.
I have not.
You guys haven't even played this, have you?
No.
I have played this game.
You've played it once. The pandemic we're experiencing happened, and I played through the whole first campaign by myself, which was...
That makes sense, because that happened to a lot of games we were playing back in March.
It's been kind of a crazy year, for sure. But this was a great game, one that I played the majority of my games solo. Players assume the role of the last surviving members of an over 4,000-year-old secret society known as Eternal Order of Perseus. With perpetual missions, you face intergalactical dangers, seek out and collect alien artifacts of immense power, and protect humanoids from otherly world powers in a fight against their mortal enemy, the premortal race known as the Great Old Ones, an ancient race that exists only to feed upon the life force of planets, world killers that must be stopped once and for all.
So correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while, but it had very Cthulhu feel to it? Like science Cthulhu feel?
Expand that. I'm not sure what you mean by Cthulhu feel.
So when I think Cthulhu, I think like weird monsters out there, eldritch horror. Cthulhu itself is crazy, weird elder god that's trying to destroy the world. Or that's kind of the feeling I remember having was these alien monsters and creatures that we were fighting. They were like out there. It was.
So you nailed it with alien.
Well, I'm glad I got that. I remember that part right.
Yeah. Some of them are humanoid. Some of them are not necessarily humanoid. And some of the larger creatures do have some tentacles that would kind of maybe give you a Cthulhu
Maybe
feel.
it was them referring to them as the old ones. Maybe that's what it was.
The Great Old Ones, yeah.
Maybe it was just the tentacles and Great Old Ones, and it clicked in my head like Science Cthulhu.
I do not feel that it was a Cthulhu base. But it's still a very fun game. The scenarios are very well written, although there was a couple of erratas that made it tough to play. Like there was one room that needed to come out, played through the entire scenario, and the one room that you needed to come out, you had set aside, and then at never at any point did it tell you to bring the room in. And so I went through and lost. Went onto the BGG and found some erratas there. So the nice thing about it is, with this game, if you lose a campaign, you simply are just going to play the same campaign over again until you eventually win. I prefer games that where you lose the scenario, gives you an adverse effect, or where you win. We're going to go back again to Pandemic Legacy. If you have those outbreaks that are happening, those outbreaks remain and scar up the board and will affect your next game. This, if you lose, it's just a simple reset and you're going to play the scenario game. Not my favorite part of it, but it worked. You follow the storyline, and each campaign has a contiguous story, develops each of the characters. Each scenario is going to require certain characters to be in there because the storyline will revolve more around them than the other characters. I liked that. I got the Kickstarter version, which came with some really cool miniatures.
Minis off of Kickstarter? Are you going to the right website that I do?
Yeah. I have this big square cube of minis that are all very nice, foam packed. I just went with the cardboard and standees. Found that was easier for me to deal with. It's a great game. The minis are really cool. The cardboard standees, they work just fine for me. The story's very well written. Exploration's neat. It's just like Betrayal and House of the Hill. As you go through, more of those room tiles get added. The nice thing about this is they're puzzle piece shapes. So with Betrayal, because they're just squares, so if Dave accidentally touches them, he makes the whole house askew. Secret of the Lost Station and Secret of the Lost Tomb, they're interlocking, so that's kind of nice. I do enjoy that. I think
But they're still square, right?
Yeah, they're still square.
They interlock so that way you don't eschew them as easily.
But it's something I'm looking forward to playing with you guys next year when it's on my 10 for 10.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Secret of the Lost Station by Everything Epic. Very well done. I don't think you necessarily need the minis, but
you're wrong.
People love minis.
But you're wrong.
And I could be.
So I'm going to talk about a game that has been around for a long time. I'm going to talk about BattleTech. BattleTech is the first tabletop war game I've ever played. It is published by Catalyst, I think is who publishes it now. When I got into it, it was FASA Corporation. BattleTech, you are in the 31st century. So BattleTech is a science fiction tactical war game in which players battle one another with various war machines. The heart of the game, the battle mech. There's other aspects of the game. There's infantry, vehicles, power armor, aircraft. Honestly, I've never played with any of those.
But they're awesome.
I don't even know.
Oh, okay.
I have the rules for them, but we usually just play with the mechs. It's kind of the nice thing about this game. It's rated as far as weight is concerned as a moderate heavy game. But the beauty part of this game is it doesn't have to be. It can be a little bit lighter war game if you go with just basic rules. So the books come with already pre-created mechs that you can use. But what we like to do is there's rules for building your own mechs. You design our own mechs, figure out what engine you want to put in there, your movement points, how much armor you want to put in, how much internal structure, all your weapons, and we design our own mechs and then we try them out. Each player controls between 1 and 4 mechs. And what we typically will do is have a tonnage that we go off of. Each player's allotted so many tons, and you can build as many mechs as you want. The mechs range from 20 tons all the way up to 100 tons. Light mechs, medium mechs, heavy mechs, and assault mechs.
Sounds like a ton of fun.
It is a ton of fun.
I like it.
And you play on a hex grid. There's 2 ways to play. You can play on a hex grid, which is what we're talking about, but you can also play on just a 3D mat and use measurement tools. A lot of people that play with 3D terrain will do that, play with the actual measurement method instead of the hex grid. But the game comes with just paper boards that you can lay out that have hexes and just the 2D terrain printed on the boards. And so in Battletech, you take turns moving. Whoever won initiative, they move last. They will get the benefit of seeing where everybody else gets to move their mechs and then be able to position themselves in a tactical position. Because in this game, facing matters. Which way your mech is facing does matter. I know there's a lot of war games that doesn't necessarily matter. In Battletech, it does.
So kind of like Robo Rally that Dave was talking about was whatever way you're facing.
Right, because you have weapons in different parts of your body. You may have a weapon that faces rearward. You can fire that weapon at a mech in your rear arc. Or if you've torso twisted and somebody's in your right arc, you can only fire weapons on your right side, on your right arm. You don't have as much armor in your rear arc. If someone hits you in the rear arc, you're going to potentially get your armor depleted more quickly, start taking critical damage. Once everybody moves, then we go to declaring what weapons you're going to fire, which mechs you're going to be firing at. Everybody shoots at the same time. So let's say I get an extremely lucky hit and I shoot the head off of one of Nathan's mechs.
It's not very nice of you, by the way.
It's not. I have to be on that end because I am on the receiving end of it usually. I get my head blown off almost every game. Just because I rolled my dice first doesn't mean that your mech won't get a chance to fire. Everybody fires simultaneously. So even though we maybe resolved your damage first, that mech would still get a chance to fire before he dies at the end of the round. As far as war games are concerned, I really enjoy this one. I like certain war games and I don't like certain war games. I was big into Warhammer 40k back in high school, but I don't really enjoy war games that much. I don't know if it's because of the mech creation and then trying them out that makes it so much fun, but it's one of those games where there's a lot of complexity to it, but once you have that memorized, what your target number is and how to calculate your target number based on range and whether you ran or walked and how many hexes your target moved, is there cover. So there is a level of complexity. There's tables to help you as well. It's really pretty streamlined and it goes pretty quick. We haven't played Battletech quite a few years, but that's one game we still do occasionally break out. Played that since, I think my first time playing that was early 90s.
So it says here that's 2 to 20 players. How many players have you played with?
And that's what I was going to ask. What was the optimal? Because BGG said 2.
Have played with 2. The most I've played with, I think, is 5.
Was it good 5? Or was it like, I'm never going to do it again 5?
Oh, I would do it again. It was fun. We've done teams before, and then we've just done a free-for-all. One thing that has been fun that we've done in the past is you can actually have, so maybe one side defends, and the other one you'll have a fortress that the offense try to get into the keep and do some sort of objective. You can actually make it a little more interesting by having different scenarios. And there is a lot of content for this game as well. You can go as deep as you want into this, and it almost resembles like role game.
Right, yeah.
There's a lot of depth, or you can go to doing a skirmish, creating mechs and doing a skirmish.
I really enjoy the appeal of being able to build and create your own mechs. I love that. As I've played Star Wars Legion, really do kind of enjoy those tabletop games. I just wish it wasn't a 2-player game. Rarely do I have one other person to play a game with to set up a whole table and usually leave it on that table. If I was playing just that game, you talked about Warhammer 40k, Legion, Armada, any of those big tabletop battle games. See, and I feel the appeal for those games, but the fact that it's just 2 players eliminates that from a lot of my table space. Even a game like Star Wars Rebellion, they say it's a 2 or a 4-player game, which is only a 2-player game. Kind of like you let your kid sister play with you and gave her the Nintendo controller and didn't have it plugged in. I see the appeal of being able to create your mechs, battle your mechs. That would be very appealing.
Well, the nice thing about Battletech is it doesn't take up a ton of table space.
That's good.
And the other nice thing about it is the length of the game. It's not a quick game, but you're not 8 hours. I know.
And you're comparing that to Warhammer, right?
Correct. Warhammer or Star Wars Miniatures tabletop war game. Obviously, it depends on the size of your army. Some of those games, 12-hour games, just one war game.
One nice thing is you can design your mechs ahead of time, too. You can take the 3 months that it requires to design your mech, just come in and battle.
So most of us can finish designing a mech in an hour. or all of our mechs in an hour. Dave typically doesn't play with us because it takes him 3 months to design a mech.
Dave, you have choices between these ones right here. Everyone else gets to go through this stack.
How wooed.
Yeah, it is kind of rude that you take so long.
But that is Battletech. I've enjoyed playing Battletech over the last 20 or so years that we have played it. The nice thing about it is you can go as deep in it as you want or just do skirmishes. I enjoy just the skirmishes and the mech creation. Definitely some weight to it if you so desire.
That is 4 grid movement games: Robo Rally, Betrayal Legacy, Secret of Lost Station, and Battletech, or BT as the kids call it on the street.
The street lingo for board games. I didn't know we had street lingo for a board game.
Didn't say we were that cool. Andy might be that cool. But yeah, 4 games that use that grid movement. Next week, we're going to be talking Halloween games.
Because I've convinced us to talk about them again.
Halloween is one of Logan's favorite holidays of the year. Forward to that, we're going to be talking about Halloween games. So tune in next week. Bring your own creepy Halloween music, because I don't have any. That's it for 4 grid movement games. The grid. Made me feel Tron.
We live on the grid instead of off the grid, because the grid is so much better. Because, power, all that other stuff, and off the grid is when you're off in the mountains, chopping your own wood. It's really sad.
Or have solar power.
Debatable about which is better.
Until next time!
We'll see you on the grid. Not Tron Grid, though. That's another cool grid. I always loved Tron. I thought it was a great movie.